All right, welcome to the Detroit Lions News Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chapp, along with my special guest, Nate Castro. And look, if you were with us last week for the podcast, you recognize exactly who is here. It's Nate Castro. But we're going to play the intro, and then we're going to get out into everything Lions. So let's go. I don't know. I'm having a reason. Stupid thing. All right. Um, it's been a fun start to the show. Obviously, some technical difficulties or whatever. So we're good. We're good to go. But the Lions have made some moves. Obviously, we know exactly what today is. It's cut down day. The Lions are trying to finalize their 53-man roster. Right now, they're at 52, which is peculiar because we're kind of trying to figure out what's that 53rd spot going to go to. But just so people are unaware of the way this works. So the roster today is not going to be the roster for opening game. Like, no way, no how. The one player that they're going to try to get through is John Kaminsky. They had designated two players to return, Emmanuel Mosley and Broderick Martin, I believe. I'll check that in a minute. They designated those two to return. John Kaminsky, I imagine, will be back at some point in time. But here's the issue with adding him onto the IR earlier. If you add him onto the IR before cutdown day, he can't come back at all. So that's what they're going to try to do. I think once they do that, Kyle Pecco will come back to the 53-man roster. I think he's a guy that can come back as a defensive tackle, especially with Broderick Martin out as designated return. We don't know what Broderick, but we're going to get into that too. But there's just a lot of stuff to get into, so we're going to get into it. How you doing, Nate?
Doing good, man. Doing good. This is the day we've been waiting for. Just right now, the initial 53-man roster is out, and yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing it and seeing what your thoughts are and what questions you have for me.
Yeah, so let's start with the first part of the Lions move. So they placed on reserve NFI Christian Mahogany. That's no surprise because earlier in training camp, Dan Campbell was saying they would hope they would get him back. So something seemed like there was something different in terms of the way that they were thinking about it. So, and if you're watching, you can leave your comments below. We'll get to your comments in a minute. Placed on reserve, injured, designated for return. You have Broderick Martin and Emmanuel Mosley. Now, I don't know about you, Nate, but I do think Emmanuel Mosley will come back at some point later in this year. Broderick Martin, I don't know about you, but he's been a total disappointment from every word go. What's your take on that?
I mean, he was doing really well in training camp. It's unfortunate he got hurt. I was definitely looking forward to him starting off year two in a good position, especially, with Pecco getting waived. And I do agree with that. I think Pecco probably will come back and should come back because they do need a nose tackle and somebody to eat up space along with Aleem McNeil until Reeder's ready for game two. And even if something happened to Reeder or McNeil, you want to have that veteran presence. Mm-hmm. Right now, they're very young and very, very inexperienced with Wingo and Onzarike. They haven't played a lot. So Martin's still a project. I mean, the reality is you got to look at where he came from. He came from Western Kentucky. That's not a Power 5 conference. So he didn't play against big-time talent. And you notice that a lot of these guys that play at small schools, they struggle coming to the pros. And so it's going to take some time. I'm not ready to write him off and call him a bust by any means. But he needs some time, get healthy. And, hopefully he'll be back somewhere mid-season or something like that and can hopefully make his presence felt.
Yeah, to me, it was more like, I don't know, like Broderick Martin, I didn't think he'd do anything his rookie year. But now that you drafted Mekhi Wingo, I feel like, this is my standpoint, I don't know if you're going to agree with me here or not, but I feel like Mekhi Wingo is going to overtake Broderick Martin for that rookie kind of that young defensive tackle spot. And if Levi Onwuzurike does anything close to what we were hearing in training camp or, preseason, I think that he could be a guy to watch too. Broderick Martin his whole thing was his size. Well, if you watch him at Western Kentucky, which I did, obviously watching him at Western Kentucky, it's a little bit different because the competition he's going against is not great.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
we could all agree that. But when you go against Auburn, you have a really good game, and his pad level is exceptional, and that's the one thing that people talk about when they talk about Broderick Martin. They talk about his pad level. Does he get too high? Does he get too low? And for me, watching that Auburn game, I've seen him blow up a play with Tank Bigsby. I've seen him blow up a couple plays with Western Kentucky. The issue is, like, he's very inconsistent with his pad level, and him being such a bigger guy, you lose that pad level. Sometimes you're sunk. Like, you're sunk. Like, doesn't matter how you play or how big you are. If you lose that pad level and you give the offensive lineman, a chance to push you over, they're going to do it in a heartbeat. So that's what I thought with Broderick Martin. And then, obviously John Kaminsky going to IR. Obviously we know he's going to be injured for a while.
That one hurts a lot. That one hurts a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because, I don't think it's funny, but I think it's funny because a lot of people downplay the significance of John Kaminsky. Like, oh, look, we got these players, such and such. It's like, you don't want to lose any depth at this point. I mean, over the course of a season, you expect to lose 1, 2, 3. You're going to lose people. There's just no doubt about it. But at the same time, like John Kaminsky, he played some pretty high snaps for the Lions, and it's going to be interesting to see who really takes that snaps over. Like, is it Levi Onwuzurike, Davenport, James Houston made the roster, and can he be the guy that does that? Things that we need to know.
I think with Kaminsky, people need to understand, kind of like with Broderick Martin too. Broderick Martin's not brought in to get sacks. He's got brought in to be a space eater. To, if he can get pressure or blow up plays, great. But he's basically like a DJ Reader. DJ Reader is that same position. He's going to play that space eater, and if he can blow up plays or get a sack or here or there, that's great. But his thing is to be the run guy and to be a space eater. And so with John Kaminsky is not a sack artist by no means.
No.
His responsibility is to set the edge. His responsibility is to keep that play from going too far outside. And John Kaminsky has done that, and he's been successful at doing that. Can he get sacks? Yeah, he can get sacks at times. But what really John Kaminsky, really losing him hurts is that you have a lot of inexperience after him now that he's gone. You have Houston. You have Pascal, who are hoping Pascal takes a big step forward, and who knows who else. I think that's it. You don't have a lot of depth at the in position as we look at the 53-man roster. So I thought Awuku was going to make the 53, but he didn't. Hopefully he makes the practice squad because he's a name you could bring up very quickly because of his speed and his ability to get to the quarterback. But there's just a lot of inexperience on that side of the D-line. And so a lot of young players are going to have to step up into bigger roles.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. You brought up an interesting point. I think when the Lions signed DJ Reader, there was a lot of people that were in the mentions of my page, comments on my page, all that stuff. They were saying like, oh, well, he doesn't get sacks. Well, DJ Reader's job is not to get sacks. It's to hold up people so guys like Hutch can get sacks, Lee McNeil can get sacks, and whoever plays defensive end on the opposite side of DJ Reader, he's going to be the ultimate benefactor of DJ Reader. Like, that's what DJ Reader is, and that's what you expected Broderick Martin to be. Now, hopefully Broderick Martin can get it together and he'll be that guy going into the future. But for right now, it's been a little bit of disappointment. And you look at a guy like Mekhi Wingo. I really love Mekhi Wingo. I don't know about you, Nate, but I love the.
Oh, he's got a lot of good speed, but he's very small, so he's not going to be a guy that's going to eat up a lot of space. But you can definitely put him at an in situation, or you can put him in the inside and try to get to the quarterback because of his ability to get small with bigger guys. Like kind of like an Aaron Donald. I'm not saying he's Aaron Donald. People calm down, but Aaron Donald's biggest strength was the fact is he was small because guards couldn't get on him so quickly. He would get past guards so easily. So Wingo can give some of that ability.
Yeah, the reason I like Mekhi Wingo is you watch him at LSU. He was an absolute beast. He can play defensive end. The reason I say that he's going to be a kind of a useful part this year is if Pascal doesn't live up to the hype that he has, if Houston doesn't live up to the hype he has, Wingo can play defensive end too. Now, where someone can come in and take Broderick's spot is Kyle Pecco when he comes back on the roster. I assume he will be back on the roster. We both assume he will be back on the roster. We talked about
the practice squad. Either way.
I think he's gonna be whenever they clear that roster spot for John Kaminsky going to IR. That's when Pecco will come in because it opens up a defensive line spot. I think they got a little bit too many ends right now. They don't got that big defensive tackle next to Reeder. So that's why they're gonna go with Pecco. You know, I think Pecco was kind of like that guy that they were like, nah, we don't want to let go of him. But
it's a numbers game. They had to figure the roster out, and they're gonna bring him back. There's no doubt.
Yeah, we're gonna get you back. They probably told him in the meeting, we're gonna bring you back. Don't you worry. We just have to crunch these numbers. And Pat Kerwin of NFL Network Radio, Moving the Chains, he always says this. Like he said this the last couple of days, but. You know, this is always a different time for these general managers because they're trying to crunch the roster. Right. And when you got players like, you know, we already have a couple players that are on IR, like Badgley, you know what I'm saying? So if you put them on IR before the preseason ends, they're out for the year, no matter what. They can't come back. You can only designate 2 players to return. And then once it gets, you know, a guy like Kaminsky has to go on the roster and then be put on IR. And that's when you're going to get, you know, your extra roster spot.
Also, too, it frees up more spots for guys that they want to make the roster.
Yeah.
And so they'll take the chance of I don't see Pecco getting picked up. I mean, he's not all world or anything like that, but he fits Detroit because Detroit needs him. And actually, you know, with Reeder possibly not being ready till the next the second game, I actually think Pecco could start if he start with Lee McNeil for game 1.
Yeah, I do think that's the case. That's why I said Kyle Pecco will be back. And he has familiarity with Terrell Williams, defensive line coach. And, you know, that was
a reason why he didn't play any preseason.
Yeah,
they knew he was a lock to make it.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, you're not getting your job. You're not going to play in preseason. I'm pretty sure it's kind of said, like, you might be part of the number that gets cut for the first day, but you're coming back after like the second day. So that's how it's going to go.
That's what they did with Craig Reynolds, I think, last year, didn't they? They cut Craig Reynolds and then they brought him back on the practice squad. And then he made the active roster. The same thing.
Yep. And then we got the release people. We got they released Esberg Bassi, which Therese Fountain, Javelin Goudry, Joel. I'm not going to say that name. That's way too long. Joel. Jamarco Jones, the superstar preseason wide receiver, Tom Kennedy, Sean McCune, who has a Michigan background, Michigan football player, Michigan tight end, CJ Moore, Pat O'Connor. We talked about Kyle Pecco, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nate Sudfeld, and Ty Summers were the guys that were released. Out of that list, I know we're going to get to this point right now, but what was the most surprising cut of those all?
The most surprising cut for me was Shane Zylstra. I had Shane Zylstra as TE3.
Yeah.
Now, there was rumblings in Lions Park about Hess playing more of a fullback role, and you know him coming from Iowa. You expect he's a good blocker already. That's a given.
Oh yeah,
Iowa. It's death taxes and blocking for Iowa.
Well, if you watched the all 22 from the preseason, he was a hell of a blocker, man. He blocked. He did a really good job blocking, and they were saying they were going to use him more as a fullback, but it is what it is.
But I was just surprised that Zylstra didn't make the roster. They must have been really confident with Brock Wright and Laporta and Hess. But I would have put Zylstra in there because I like Zylstra. I think Zylstra's going to get picked up by somebody. But if he doesn't, he'll be back on the practice squad again.
See, I think this might be part of the number crunch too. I think that they wanted to keep Parker Hess just for the reason of a fullback. They have 2 tight ends that they released in James Mitchell and Zylstra. If one of them gets claimed, I think they'll bring one of them back just so that they're clear. Obviously, you can use Hess as a tight end, but you know I think this is where the NFL is going. They're going to use a fullback. Their fullback is going to be part of their tight end room, which is understandable. I mean, we've seen guys like, you know, Scott Daly, some of these tight ends become long snappers. So it's not peculiar the way this is all going.
I think what's interesting is just to looking at it from that perspective is that they are serious about blocking and running the football in Detroit.
Oh yeah.
If anybody thinks that that's a joke, it's not a joke, because when you got a UDFA making the 53-man roster and you look at all the two tight ends ahead of them, even Laporta is a good blocker. Brock Wright's a good blocker. Hess is a good blocker. So they're serious about, you got to be able to block for us at the tight end position. And that's why Mitchell's not there, because Mitchell was a terrible blocker. Yep. And Zylstra, he's more of a pass catcher than a blocker, in my opinion. So, There you go.
Well, Parker Hess's grade this week for blocking was 63, which is pretty damn good. He did 15 snaps in that. Now, there's one guy that we didn't mention that we're going to mention right now. Isaiah Williams did make the roster so far. And when you said this team puts an emphasis on running the ball, just think about this. Mm-hmm. Isaiah Williams run blocking grade on Pro Football Focus every week plus 80, plus 80, plus 80, which means that you are really, really good at blocking. Mm-hmm. So what you said is totally true. They put an emphasis on this. Their wide receivers have to block. You heard J-Mo say the famous quote, no block, no rock. So it's kind of put down in there. And, Donovan Peoples-Jones, for as much as people want him to make the roster, wasn't great at blocking for the run. He was at like a 60 grade. And then you look at some of these guys that were ahead of him, offensive linemen. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But that, then you go to the waived portion. This is where you get a little bit interesting. You got Mitchell Gude, Maurice Alexander. I think the linebacker Abraham Beauplain. He's gonna make the practice squad. He'll be back in the practice squad. Jake Burton, the guard. Matthew Betts, the Canadian superstar. You have Jalen Calhoun, Duke Clemens, Scott Daly. That was a surprise to me. I'm gonna be totally honest.
Hoagie. They're gonna rock with Hoagie, man.
That was surprising. Caden Davis didn't make the roster. Kingsley.
Please bring Kingsley back. I love Kingsley, man.
I do.
I hope he does not get picked up, man. But he's gonna get picked up. He's got a lot of potential.
He's got a lot of potential. Jake Fromm is he got waived. Jake Funk, Jalen Gaines, Stephen Gilmore, Brian Hudson, Jamar Jefferson, Zonovan Knight, James Mitchell, Chris Smith, Isaac Awuku, Rashad Wildgoose. What a name. And then Shane Zylstra, the tight end from the Lions. Those were the guys that were waived. I don't know what you say about half the people on here. I mean, I didn't think a lot of them would make the roster, but
my big ask is for Awuku and Kingsley to be back on the practice squad. If those two dudes are back, I'll be so happy, because those are two guys that really showed out in preseason.
Yep.
And I know those are very hard cuts for the Lions to make. But Kingsley especially, because I'm going to go on a limb here and say this, but Frank's got maybe 2 more years left in his contract.
Yeah, as for sure, if you're thinking about this as a long-term thing, I think that's a great move.
Yeah.
The issue is I don't think he gets past the waivers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a big risk. But what I'm saying is, if he makes the practice squad, if he comes back to practice squad this year, this guy is going to be a future starter for the Lions at center. Because I think after Frank's contract's over, as much as we love the tank, I think he's going to hang it up, man. I think his body, his mindset, having the kid, I think is changed a lot. And he's a simple guy. He wants to fish. I just don't think he's going to want another contract. I think he's going to be done with the NFL. And I think Kingsley could step into that role sooner rather than later.
Yeah, here's what I say about Kingsley. I think I watched him at Florida enough to know that he's a really talented player. Mm-hmm. Did I think he would make this roster? Absolutely not, because it's just way too loaded in the offensive line.
I thought he was, but the fact that he didn't have any flexibility at guard.
See, that was the issue. That was the issue that I had right there. Is because usually you see a guy like a center and he has some guard flexibility, so you're like, okay, we can keep this guy on the roster. Like a guy like Graham Glasgow is really important because he can play center and guard. So when you think about it, like Kingsley, can he play guard? And the answer was no. So you look
They
at
tried
him,
it.
you're
They
like,
tried him, but it was later in the process, and I think he could still play guard. But yeah, he didn't have that going for him when it cut down.
well, I mean, when you try to do
But
it later in the when you try to do it later in the process, that's where you get a little bit of like you're
true.
not going to learn as fast as people. So it was interesting, but yeah, I hope Kingsley comes back. I think Isaac Wuku would come back. Maybe if we're looking at the waived guys, maybe Caden Davis,
Beauplan, Betts,
Beauplan, yeah,
Clemens.
yep.
I'd even bring back Fromm. If you're not going to bring back Nate Sudfeld, I bring back Fromm. I bring back Mitchell, maybe Zylstra. I bring a lot of those dudes back. I mean, because you have 16 people you got to fill that roster with. And let's be real. People need to understand that when we say a player gets picked up by waivers, you have to put them on your active roster, period.
Right.
So these have to be outstanding players that you have to say, you know what, we're going to make you on our active roster. So I expect a lot of these dudes to come back to the practice squad because nobody knows their team better than the team that they went through training camp with. So
yeah, I always think it's interesting. Like when people talk, I saw a comment in the comment section. What's the difference between waived and released? And it's like it's a good question, but waived, every team gets a chance to claim you, but you have to be put on the 53-man roster. Released is usually for veterans, so you're not getting put on a practice squad. Usually, I know the practice squad rules have changed from a wide variety, but that's usually the way it is. But
yeah, most of them consist of like undrafted free agents or players that are like rookies or stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah. So that was the roster portion of the podcast. Obviously, there's a lot to get through. Let's get through some comments that we have on here. Did they let Fromm go? Yes, they let Fromm go. All right, pulls up.
But he'll probably come back to the practice squad. He played really well in the preseason.
Lions villain squad, yeah. DJ Reader demands a double team. If you don't, then he blows your play up. We kind of hit on that. As much as I talk Levi, he better do something.
Agree.
It's make or break for Levi.
Contract year. If he wants to get paid, man, he better do something. I agree.
Lions villain squad. They may have worked it out beforehand. Pecco might be doing a solid Craig Reynolds did last year. That's kind of what we're kind of going by. Right. That's what it is, basically. Robert Taylor, what's your comments on the guy from Canada? I don't know what you think, Nate, but like Matthew Betts, I didn't think he had any chance of making the roster, to be honest.
He had to really ball out in preseason, and I didn't really see that. I will say this about him: he has a really good motor. He's very good at running to the quarterback. He got that one sack where he ate up the quarterback in that play. I would love to see him come back to the practice squad and continue to work with Coach T. I think you're seeing Coach T really's imprint on this D-line, and I would love to see him come back because we don't know the severity of Kamish's injury, but they're going to need more bodies. And, with Pascal, we hope Pascal has a step up this year. Houston's on his last Davenport. Houston's on his last hurrah. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities next year for a guy like Betts to make this roster. Wuku, same thing. So I hope he comes back to the practice squad. But everybody says he might go back to Canada. I don't know if he's eligible to go back to Canada and play, but whatever.
I don't know how the rules work with them going back to Canada and everything.
I'd stay with the Lions, man. They might need you.
Mark says, surprised that Commissioner's on the 53. They will move him to some type of IR list. Yeah. That's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to move him to the IR list. And then once they get that roster spot available, then they'll bring back Paco or someone like that. But it's interesting. They're not at 53 right now. They're at 52. So there's another move coming, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Matt says they need a middle linebacker. That's what he says.
They have one. It's Jack Campbell.
Well, yeah, I mean they got Ben Neiman too, so Ben Neiman's pretty good.
Yeah, dude, they're loaded at linebacker, man. They have Rodrigo coming back healthy. Neiman is a special teams ace and a guy who can play in a pinch. You've got Reeves Maven who can play in a pinch and play well. Dude, they're loaded at linebacker. I love their linebacker. This is the best linebacker we've seen in a long time.
Do you agree with me or not? I think they're going to bring back Ty Summers at some point. I think Ty Summers. They
need to bring him back to practice squad. He was very impactful. Yes.
Yeah, I like Ty
and Bopan.
Yeah, if they can bring back those two, their linebacker room is pretty damn good.
Dude, Shep is the man. Shep is the man. Nobody talks about Shep.
when you think about like the linebacker crew, I mean, this is a great point for me and you to kind of divulge.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the linebacker room, like, okay, your 3 starters are Campbell, Anzalone, Barnes.
Right.
Then you go to the next level. You go, is there really a huge drop off here? You go Jalen Reeves-Maybin, Ben Neiman, and Malcolm Rodriguez. Yep. Not a bad 3, to back up. And most teams do not carry 6 or more linebackers. So a lot of teams carry they'll carry 5, and they'll have that one that swings over to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have a middle linebacker, backup middle linebacker, just in case. But for the most part, it's usually the way it goes. But
I would tell you this: on any other team, Rodrigo or Barnes could be a starting linebacker on the team.
Absolutely.
That's how deep. That's how deep we are. Shep said it best. He's like, we got 4 starters in our team, and they all know that they're not all going to play heavy minutes, but they're okay with that. They encourage each other. They bring each other up. And that's what I love about Shep, man. He gets his boys ready. And Rodrigo, when Barnes got hurt, made that interception in the championship game. Hey, he just stepped in and did his thing, man. I love Rodrigo. I'm glad he's back.
Rodriguez is a damn good linebacker. He could start on another team like most teams you would believe. Derek Barnes has turned into a good good linebacker. Anzalone, for everyone that hated on him, he's a great linebacker. Doesn't really miss any tackles. Mm-hmm. And then you go to a guy like Jack Campbell, who's still growing, and he's going to get better and better and better. And
that guy's going to have a breakout year.
I think this is going to be a breakout year for him. That me and you are kind of in lockstep there. Mm-hmm. That's good. That's the point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, linebackers aren't really a concern right now. I think if we're going to be totally honest, Nate, parts of the team that I think we could be concerned about would be defensive end. Who helps out Hutch on the other side. That's the main portion. And do we have enough depth? And then on the defensive side, maybe you go, I don't know.
I would say receiver and defensive line are the 2 biggest somewhat needs still on this team.
I think receiver is one of those. I think they're going to get a receiver before the day's over, to be honest.
Yeah, that's why I think they're holding that last spot for Commish, either for Pecco. I think they can let Pecco go through waivers and he'll be fine. They'll be able to bring him back.
Yeah.
But they're looking for that receiver. And there's some names I want to talk about that have come up recently that have gotten cut, and I want your thoughts on those. So we can get into that whenever.
All right, we'll get that in a minute. And then so let's get to some more comments. Timothy Marquardt says just came in late, but no pickups from other teams' cuts. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That's why I kind of transitioned.
Yeah.
Lionsville, he's talking on exposition. Matt says get Tony. Do you want Kadarius Toney? Okay, we're good.
No.
We're good there.
No, guy can't hold his water.
All right, so let's get to this. Okay, let's just get it out in the forefront. Whatever. Who do you look at for the Lions wide receiver? Because I do think Isaiah Williams will be a good wide receiver for this team, but obviously you're looking for another guy. If I'm looking for another guy, I don't know. Do you look at Isaiah Hodgins from New York? Do you look at Tim Patrick in Denver?
So first off, Isaiah Williams deserves to be on this team. The guy was the most consistent receiver out of the whole preseason. We thought it was going to be Green, but Green got hurt. Hopefully Green comes back at some point. I would love to have him back. But Isaiah Williams deserves a spot. So congratulations, kudos to him. I'm excited to see what he can bring. All right. If we're talking receiver, we need a big receiver. We don't need a 5'10" receiver. Sorry, John Michi. Sorry, anybody under 6 foot. I'm talking a 6'2" to 6'4" receiver. So you mentioned Tim Patrick. I know a lot of people are down on Tim Patrick. Listen, we don't need Tim Patrick to come in and start, okay? I'm okay with having J-Mo, Amara, and Khalif Raymond as your 3 receivers in the starting lineup if you run 2 tight ends or whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
But Tim Patrick would not be a bad guy to have as a depth person. He's 6'4". He's been productive when he's been healthy. Yes, I understand he hasn't caught a ball in 3 years because he's had significant injuries. He had an Achilles. He had a ACL, which scares a lot of people away.
Yeah.
But like I've told people in the chat, the reality is, listen, if you're going to pick up anybody right now, whether it's a waiver, free agent, or whatever, they're either hurt a lot or they haven't done nothing. So really, there's no risk to any of you taking any of these dudes. You're not paying them big money. You're probably giving them a 1-year deal. So, yes, I would take Tim Patrick because we need a veteran guy with a young receiving core that we have. Brown is only 24. J-Mo is what, 22, 21, something like that?
Yeah, so he's young player.
Yeah, Khalif Raymond's your vet. Actually, Khalif Raymond's your vet receiver. But, you need another vet guy, and I would love to have Tim Patrick. But I'll throw out another name to you that came available that I really like. Terrence Marshall. He got cut from the Panthers. Now, this guy coming out of LSU had some game. He's got good speed, good size. He kind of was, I think, because of lack of bad quarterback play, he wasn't able to shine with the Panthers. And then they got Leggett, and then they got Thielen. They got other guys, so he kind of fell down the depth chart a little bit, Shark. So I would give him a 1-year deal and a prove-it deal. He's 24 years old. He's 6'2", perfect for your X receiver. He's got good speed. I'd give him a shot. If you're talking about going a younger guy and you could put in as a 5th receiver for the Lions. You there? Joe? I think you froze, buddy. Joe, you there? Okay. Well, Joe froze, so we'll be right back. So we're just going to stay here. But yeah, like I said, so I definitely would get either a guy like Marshall, a guy like Patrick, because he can go with a guy like Brown, J-Mo, Khalif Raymond. You'd have some good depth there. But, a lot of people like Michi. I get it. Michi's 5'10". The problem is I don't know if he fits your big receiver kind of mold. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I do trust the guys we have. And like I said many, many times, that the reality is – oh, he's coming back. Slowly but surely. But, the reality is we have – are you there, Joe?